Hello, Ross Jordan again with Inquiring International. We're talking through Level 1 compliance, which is self-attestation for CMMC. We are in Section 11. We are talking about risk assessment. So again, the three questions, plain English, what is risk assessment? This is not a security assessment. This is not a penetration test. This is looking at your supply chain and everything that touches your organization to make sure that it meets minimum standards for federal contracting. I'm going to give you what some of those are here in a little bit, but don't think of this as a pen test. This is what happens if test. When I was doing a lot of international business, or when I've done business internationally, when we've got supply chains that come from foreign countries, we have to consider what happens if there's a political issue, or if there's a means in which I can no longer get that. That could be a tariff, right? Raising my product costs 30%. That could be a political issue, an election. It could be a lot of things. In areas, certain areas of Mexico, maybe there's a violence thing you have to worry about, or cartels. So there's a lot of things that can affect your supply chain. How do you work around it? So if that happens, then what? You got to realize, you got to look at this from the assessment of who you're supplying to, right? So if you're contracting to the U.S. military for metal, and you're getting some of that metal out of the Middle East, or you're getting some of that metal out of Middle America, you're having issues with transportation, or there's a big flood down the Mississippi, you're still going to have to meet your minimum standards on that contract. So what happens if? So that's the physical way of looking at a risk assessment. Another way of looking at risk assessment is the data, and that's what this really addresses. What happens when your CRM is breached? Let's say you're using Salesforce and somebody breaks into Salesforce. Now you have to worry about what that looks like in terms of your data and your data management and data security. So the risk assessment goes far beyond data. It looks at the entire picture. It is anything that is involved in your supply chain that would impact your contract management. So getting right into that, it can be formal, it can be informal. It does not have to be something you hire an outside agency to come audit. This can be you or a series of people in your organization looking at their area of supply chain management and figuring out, can this be done? What happens if there's a problem? Also, the analysis needs to be focused on critical areas of your organization. What would impact us the most? What would be the most harmful? We've had international sourcing where we've had a major change, and we've had to use a secondary supplier who was much more expensive, but it was for a period of time. So think about that. So if I've got to get this material from somebody else and it's going to cost me twice what it's costing me today, how long can I do that? What other sources do we need to find? Who in the organization is responsible for finding them, so on and so forth. Prioritize those fixes based on your need to facilitate your primary contracts. Even if it's not a government contract, this is a good time to do this for the biggest contracts in your organization. I suggest a regular cadence on this as well. This needs to be reviewed by multiple people, and I might even recommend that you do this with different people each year. It's interesting, the perspectives and how people see things differently. So if you physically do it this year, have somebody else do it next year, and not a checks and balances as much as they're just going to see things differently. Their life experiences, their business experience, their corporate experience is going to help them look at things differently. So have somebody else do it. Yes, it takes the load off you a little bit, but more importantly, you're going to get more visibility as to where the areas are. Let's look at also too, when you're talking about service providers, look at the risk that they can provide your organization to. Again, if somebody has a breach on their end, what's that mean to you? Also to supply chain risk as well. So there is an area of NIST that addresses risk assessments greatly. It is SP 800-30. Yes, I'm using notes. I don't remember all these acronyms all the time. But there's a lot of information on there. I pulled up the website before I filmed this video, and just this month alone, there were 2 changes to this that impacted you. One was in cybersecurity, and the other one is in control management of supply chains. There are a few sources that they provide. Now, these are questions for the IT. We're kind of jumping into that right now, but you need to know if you have any items that are SCAP validated. Now, what's SCAP stand for? Security, Control, Automation Protocol. That is basically the rules of engagement between softwares. What protocols, what security protocols are provided from this one to make sure they only access certain information on this one. Those changes happen often. There's a lot of things we find in software. One of the other changes this month was in AI, new rules around AI. It's been out now for several months publicly, but we always find new things. There's different things happening all the time. So make sure that somebody's watching the NIST website to make sure that they're seeing all those things. Also, too, you need to figure out if you've got something on the National Vulnerability Database. Now, this is basically a database put out by the government that says, hey, these tools, these softwares, these hardwares have known challenges or known vulnerabilities that we need to make sure that you're not using them. That list is there. It adds and it changes. You need to ask your IT team if they're familiar with the SCAP protocols, but also too, do we have anything on the National Vulnerability Database? Very important. That's a huge part of your risk. I mean, if it's a known vulnerability, that means the bad guys know it's there too. So get that stuff off your network as soon as you can. Have we done one before? That's another great assessment, or another great question. Have we done this assessment before? Where are the results from it? What did we do? Who's in charge of it? Also, too, this is a great time to ask them, are there any vulnerabilities in any of our network that you're aware of? More importantly, what's coming? What's coming to end of life? Windows 10 changed this year, and there was a lot of changes around that. A lot of systems that had to be updated and upgraded. You want to ask those questions, one, because you want to know where the challenges are, but two, you also want to be able to budget for the replacement or the repair of those vulnerabilities. And if it's on the national database, get that fixed yesterday. So risk assessment is, again, looking at the entire organization, everything that touches it, all of your supply chain, all of your data management tools, and finding out if there's a risk to your organization in being able to facilitate the contract you have. Welcome to risk assessment.